Tonight on Reel to Reel, we'll take a look at sainthood and how a saint is made when we talk with two local authorities on the subject, Monsignor James McGrath and Father Joseph Martino.
We'll also learn about two current causes for sainthood, the cause for Mother Catherine Drexel and the cause for Padre Pio. All that and more tonight. Hello, I'm Jane Rudolph.
And I'm Father Dave McAllen. Welcome to Reel to Reel. Good evening and welcome to another special edition of Crosstalk here on Reel to Reel. Throughout its history, the Catholic Church has granted a position of honor and respect to a select group of persons judged to be worthy of sharing the presence of God in heaven. I speak, of course, of the saints.
But the procedure used by the Church to determine sainthood is a complex system of investigation that can leave many people confused. Tonight in our studios, we will try to demystify the process of sainthood with an explanation of the steps leading to the canonization of a saint. We'll also have a discussion on some of the finer points of sainthood with several people from our area who have been involved in local causes for canonization.
A cause for canonization begins today, as it has throughout the history of the Church, with the public recognition of a person who lived a particularly holy life. If the person's reputation for holiness remains long after death, then any person or group under the patronage of a diocese can take up the cause for canonization in the name of the deceased. The first step is to petition the bishop of the diocese where the person died. At this point, the deceased person is referred to as servant of God. If the bishop sees merit in pursuing the cause, he'll first inform the sacred congregation for the causes of saints in Rome. Second, he appoints a postulator in Rome and a vice postulator in the diocese to act as advocates or supporters of the cause. Their job will be to gather and study evidence in support of the cause. Locally, the vice postulator, in conjunction with the diocese, begins to gather evidence on the servant to prove that the servant lived a life of heroic virtue. The vice postulator accomplishes this by analyzing all available writings of the servant to ensure that they are theologically in accordance with church teaching, and by hearing and documenting testimony from witnesses attesting to the holiness of the servant. If there's nothing to disprove the holiness of the servant, the information is compiled and sent to the sacred congregation for the causes of saints. After reaching the sacred congregation, the information is turned over to a priest known as the relator, whose job it is to study and scrutinize the materials, and then stating his conclusions as to the heroic virtue of the servant. His conclusions are presented to the sacred congregation for a vote of approval to declare the servant venerable. After approval by the sacred congregation, the Pope signs a decree of heroic holiness in the name of the servant. The servant of God has now completed step one of the canonization process and is given the title of venerable. At this stage, the person is restricted to private veneration on the diocesan level. The next step in the process of canonization involves the introduction of a miracle. When an alleged miracle performed in the name of the venerated person is discovered, the vice postulator in the person's diocese begins to gather documentation and testimony on the circumstances of the miracle. The vice postulator then petitions the opinions of local experts on the medical facts of the case. If the case cannot be medically explained, the information is forwarded to the postulator in Rome. In Rome, the postulator presents the circumstances of the alleged miracle to a board of medical experts approved by the sacred congregation. The board will decide whether or not the case can be medically explained. If no medical explanation can be found, then the case is presented to a board of theological consultors of the congregation. If it is concluded that a miraculous cure has taken place, then the board will approve the miracle. Once approved, the case will be voted on by the entire congregation. If approved, the case will be passed on to the Pope with a recommendation for beatification. With the Pope's approval, the person is now beatified and has completed the second step of canonization. With beatification, the person receives the title of blessed and is entitled to public veneration on the diocesan level. After beatification, the cause awaits proof of another miracle in the name of the blessed servant. The second miracle will go through the same examination process as did the first miracle. Upon approval of a second miracle by the Sacred Congregation, the Pope may proceed with an official declaration of canonization, followed by a formal ceremony inducting the newly sainted into the cult of saints. Once a saint is declared a saint, that declaration is an infallible declaration on the part of the Pope. Continuing our discussion tonight, we have with us Monsignor James McGrath, pastor of Sacred Heart Parish in Manoa, Pennsylvania, and Father Joseph Martino, who is on the faculty of St. Charles Borromeo Seminary in Overbrook. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Monsignor, how did you get involved with canonizations?
I was a member of the tribunal in 1955, and we were investigating the miracle for the beatification of St. John Newman. And upon completion of that work, which was finalized in 1961-62, for the beatification in 1963, and then we waited for a miracle for the canonization, which took place in 1977. And at that time, His Eminence Cardinal Kroll asked me to work on the cause of Mother Drexel, and I'm still working on that cause.
And Father Martino, how did you get involved?
At the particular juncture for which I was brought into the cause needed a summary of the material that had been collected thus far, and some small research into other materials, and the whole case had to be packaged in an historical framework. And history, church history, is the field in which I had been trained, and I was available at the time, and was very happily called into service at that point, 1984.
Is it normal that there's a massive amount of work done on the local level before it would go to the Vatican?
According to the present norms, that is true. The norms which were in effect before 1983 were entirely different than the new norms, which are a simplification of the process which had been in effect. Prior to 1983, there were really two processes, one on the diocesan level, and then that would be submitted to Rome for determination as to accuracy and given scrutiny as far as the law is concerned and the life of the person. And then we had to go through an apostolic process. Under the present norms, there's just the one process on the diocesan level, which, when it is completed, is sent to Rome for study. And that's where Father Martino came into the picture after it was sent over there. That study had to be completed, and it was part of Father Martino's work to give an accurate determination to the consultors.
Well, Father Martino, why is it so important that this process be so extensive and so thorough?
Well, you mentioned already that this is a very important act of the Church's teaching authority. It is an infallible act. The Church is often derided for being careless in allowing legends to continue, and it has now turned the modern sciences around and has used them to show that the people that are being held up for the veneration of the faithful are people who really did live, really did undergo enormous conversion for Christ, and in turn became a model for everyone else to follow. So there has to be the use of science here, in history and theology and canon law. They're all sciences.
Some years ago, there was some confusion among the faithful when there seemed to be a reordering of the church calendar, and favorite saints such as St. Christopher seemed to be shelved. What happened there?
Well, there was precisely what I was speaking about. The Church found itself in a dilemma. A number of saints like St. George, St. Philomena, St. Christopher had been placed on the calendar, had become the source of great veneration. Unfortunately, it was very difficult to document precisely who these people were, where they lived. Sometimes they were several personalities combined into one legend. And so the Church had to either continue to allow the faithful to honor someone who may never have existed, to open itself up to being considered anti-intellectual, or to side on the side of historical truth. It took the individuals off the church calendar. It never said you could not honor them. So that's a distinction, I believe. You could still name someone George.
So if you still have a St. Christopher medal, you don't have to throw it out.
No.
All right. How does it normally happen that a person's holiness or reputation for holiness becomes a public matter?
Usually the individual has a reputation for holiness in life, and that perdures after death. For example, at the present time we have Mother Teresa, who has an outstanding reputation for a holy life. And I'm sure that upon her demise, we're going to find that people will be clamoring for her to be elevated to sainthood, just as in the case of Pope John the 23rd. When he died, there was an immediate calling for his canonization, and that usually perdures after death. And I experienced that very much in the case of St. John Newman. As soon as he was buried, people began to flock to his graveside, and this happens in any case where there is consideration for presentation of that person for beatification and canonization.
Seeing somebody work miracles and things like that is always a real attention getter. But the Church has said that heroic virtue is one of the key characteristics it looks for in its saints. What's that mean, Father Martino?
Well, it historically has been the one thing that always has been looked for. The miracle aspect came in much later as a further certification of this heroic holiness. Heroic holiness either through martyrdom or heroic holiness through a consistently lived holy life. Monsignor has explained this very well before, that really it is living an ordinary life out of motives of extraordinary love for God. Not doing anything maybe that's all that unusual or difficult, but doing it for a difficult motive, namely the love of God. Not necessarily counting how much they achieve, but why they achieve it.
Well, what role do miracles play then?
Now I think, as one expert put it, anyone can prove that a person is heroically holy. What you'd like perhaps is to have God's absolute say for this, and God granting a miracle through the intercession, and it is God who grants the miracle through the intercession of a particular saint. That's a rather clear sign that this person is indeed with God.
Can miracles be set aside or waived in a given case?
Well, they could very well be. In fact, the Holy Father recently beatified Kateri Tekakwitha, the Indian from North America, who had been dead over 300 years. In fact, I think it was last year they were celebrating the 300th anniversary of her demise, and she was beatified, and there were no proven miracles. But in addition to proven miracles, there is what is called the fama sanctitatis, or fama miraculorum, the reputation for miracles. And in that case, there were many miracles attributed to the servant of God. And there are also, in cases when they are introduced, many favors received or alleged to be received through the intercession of the individual. And many of them are outstanding favors. So there then develops this reputation for miracles. And there have been others beside Kateri Tekakwitha. And certainly in the early days of the Church, there were no proven miracles for beatification or canonization.
Well, Fathers, we're going to take a break right now. But when we come back, Jane will be joining in a discussion that will focus on Mother Catherine Drexel and Padre Pio. Stay with us.
The House of Charity can be found at work throughout South Jersey, wherever there is suffering and distress. Through its agencies, compassionate care goes to the elderly. The needy receive food and clothing. Special education programs administer to the mentally handicapped. Expectant mothers receive pre- and postnatal care, and medical services are rendered to the ill. Support the House of Charity in South Jersey. Touch someone's life with love.
Many people find retirement isn't as much fun as they thought it would be. Too much time on their hands, too little to do. The Retired Senior Volunteer Program has thousands of opportunities for retired executives, housewives, engineers, teachers, whatever your skills or schedule. RSVP has something to fit anyone's interests. You can do what you want, when you want to do it, and still enjoy your well-earned retirement.
What's your problem? Let's see. Let's figure this out.
You've learned a lot in your life. Share the experience of a lifetime.
Welcome back to our program. Now that we have a handle on what it takes to become a saint, we'd like to talk about two causes for canonization, and they're happening right now. With us once again is Monsignor James McGrath, representing the cause for Mother Catherine Drexel, who happens to be a Philadelphia native. And joining us now is Joan Sullivan, who's representing the cause for Padre Pio, and the National Center is located in Norristown, Pennsylvania. I welcome you both to our program. I'd like to start with a brief background on the two causes. Let's start with Mother Catherine Drexel. Now, she founded the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, and along with the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, they also took a vow to be mother and servant to the oppressed, the Indians and the blacks. Now, this happened about 70 years before civil rights really kicked in. Talk to us about her vision.
Her vision came from her own family. Her family was very interested in helping the poor. They had a very wealthy home on Walnut Street in Philadelphia, and every Wednesday the parents opened the home to allow the poor to come and beg for food and clothing. And she was taught as a child to have great concern for the poor. Her initial interest was in the poor among the Indians of the West and Southwest, and then ultimately toward the black people of the South and Southwest. And she established many institutions for educating these poor oppressed people.
Now, Padre Pio was also quite an inspirational person. He bore the wounds of Christ for 50 years, and he's quoted as saying it was difficult to have these wounds, but he deemed it a great honor to suffer with Christ. Share some of his story with us.
Well, in addition to not only the stigmata, he had all the spiritual gift that God has ever bestowed on an individual. He could bilocate, he had the gift of discernment, he could prophesy, he had the odor of perfume about his body. And when he spoke of suffering, his whole plan, his whole life was to work with Christ for the co-redemption of souls. His Mass was the highlight of his day, and when he was not at Mass, he was seen usually in prayer with a rosary in hand.
Both people are very inspirational people to all of us, but what makes Mother Catherine someone that should be canonized?
First of all, her exceptional love of Almighty God. She went about all her works with that foremost in her mind. There are those who establish institutions for doing similar kinds of work, and what makes her different is the fact that everything she did was due to her love of God. And whenever she was traveling, visiting the various institutions, she was constantly in communication with her community, writing notes to them, letters to them, urging them always to have great devotion to Christ, being mindful of his love for them and for the oppressed peoples of the world, and that they could have this similar love for Christ by their concern for the poor.
And how about for Padre Pio?
I think in the 20th century that we live in, Padre Pio is certainly a shining example of a living crucifix, a charismatic in the fullest sense of the word. And for many of us, or many of the world today, we have tended to become, I think, a doubting Thomas. If we can't see, if we can't touch, if we can't feel, but yet here is a man who had one foot totally immersed in the spiritual world and another foot very much in the technological, material 20th century. He's certainly an example of God's love.
Now, many of us are familiar with venerating the saints, but not many of us have an inside track on the process of canonization. Where is Mother Catherine Drexel's canonization cause at this point?
Just recently, within the last 2 weeks, there was an approval of her heroic virtue by the consultors in Rome, of which there were 8 together then with the 9th member of the commission, who is the promoter of faith, and they voted that Mother deserved to bear that title. That material then will be sent to the cardinals who are members of that congregation, and they are to meet on January the 13th. And if, as we hope and pray and feel confident, that is given official affirmative approval, then it will be submitted to our Holy Father, and shortly thereafter we should have the declaration of her heroic virtue, and this would therefore entitle us to refer to her as venerable.
Okay. And Padre Pio?
Since in 1969, a year after his death, his cause was initiated. For the last 12 to 14 years, the postulators have been gathering information. They just completed about 5 months ago the trial wherein over 100 witnesses have been called to give testimony, most of whom were his own confreres. All of that documentation has been sent to the Sacred Congregation for the Causes of Saints in Rome, and as Father just spoke, the next step, God willing, is that he would be declared beatified by the Holy Father.
As we mentioned before, both causes are rooted in Philadelphia. How many people are involved in the cause of Mother Catherine at the local level, and is there some sort of a grassroots movement to pray for her intercession ultimately for a miracle which will be required for the canonization process?
It's very difficult to give numbers of people that are involved in the process. Certainly all of the sisters in the community are motivated to push the process by prayer and by having the cause known as widely as possible. Those that are active in the work itself would be those that are at the headquarters for the sisters at Cornwallis Heights. As far as the canonical process, I have been appointed as the vice postulator, and when it is necessary for us to gather materials and we need a commission, we certainly use staff members from our tribunal.
And is there some sort of a movement to pray for her intercession? Has it gotten to that point?
Oh,
yet?
yes, there is a Mother Catherine Guild at the Mother House, and the number of people belonging to the Guild is quite extensive. I could not give you an exact number, but certainly in the thousands. People writing in saying that they have received favors and asking for prayer.
Now, the National Center for Padre Pio is located in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which might confuse some of us since Padre Pio was an Italian Franciscan monk. Why is it located in Norristown?
The National Center in Norristown is, as I said earlier, a direct adjunct of the friary in southern Italy. Mrs. Calandra, who was the director of the cause, is the mother of 6 children. Her 5th child was born with massive urinary tract defects, and in 1968, 3 weeks before Padre Pio died, she went on pilgrimage to see him with this sick child, who was blessed, and they returned home and continued their life of prayer petitioning God. Ultimately, the young child, Vera, was blessed, received God's graces, many improvements in her health. She has been allowed to live. She's 20 years old and celebrated a very, very happy birthday this past spring. And in Thanksgiving, the family, starting back at that time of 1969, has promoted Padre Pio's life, his spirituality, his gifts, forming prayer groups, and as I said, what started as a very much a grassroots in Norristown has now spread to English-speaking people all over the world.
And briefly, what prompted you to get so actively involved?
I saw an advertisement in 1973. Mrs. Calandra needed a secretary because the volume of correspondence was so immense, and it went from there.
Okay, well, best of luck to both of you. We wish you luck in your causes, and we thank you for being with us today. Now, please don't go away. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to have some addresses that can put you in touch with these causes. So please stay with us.
A few weeks ago, we at Reel to Reel began an appeal for your financial support. Many of you responded generously, and we wholeheartedly thank you. Because of that, we're able to continue to bring you our show every week. However, we still need and appreciate your continued support. As you know, for the past 5 seasons, we've been able to bring you this weekly show, requesting only your cards and letters in return. If you're a new viewer, or if you've enjoyed the message of Reel to Reel over these past years, we'd like to thank you for watching and invite you to participate in this venture by actively supporting the show. Today, with costs rising all around us, we need your financial support. A donation of $5, $10, $20, or whatever you can send would help ensure the continued presence of this program. Send your contributions to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103. And thank you for your help.
It's dynamic. It's really dynamic.
The acting is top-notch. The staging is creative.
You can almost touch the actors. You're right there.
Innovative, exciting, unexpected.
If you're worried about your dollar, this is the best bargain by far.
Delightfully friendly ambience.
There's a chemistry there that makes it enjoyable to attend the theater.
Villanova's Summer Theater continues with the production of Lysistrata until July 25th. Call for information.
Well, that was certainly an interesting discussion, but it's difficult to do justice to such a complex issue in just a half hour. There's a world of information out there, and we encourage you to contact Causes for more. You can contact the cause for Mother Catherine Drexel by writing the Mother Catherine Drexel Guild, 1663 Bristol Pike, Bensalem, PA 19020.
Or for Padre Pio, write to the National Center for Padre Pio, 11 North Whitehall Road, Norristown, PA 19403.
And as always, we'd like you to write to us and let us know what you think. Contact us here at Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, PA 19103.
Or call us during business hours at area code 215-668-9842. Join us next week when we meet an artist who does rather creative things with paper. Good night.
Good night, and remember that Jesus is Lord.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen Travel of Media, PA. Phone area 215-565-7070. Pope John Paul II has praised the Catholic press for its truth in witnessing to the faith. In Philadelphia, its suburbs, and the Allentown area, the Catholic Standard and Times serves the needs of the Catholic community by providing regular, accurate, and detailed information about your church. Keep up with the weekly news and features that shape your world. Subscribe to the Catholic Standard and Times. For more information, call 587-3666.
Are you 18 to 35? The next Saturday is your day. Our charismatic young adult prayer group meets at St. Charles Seminary from 7 to 9 p.m.
We've been together for 2 years now, and the numbers keep growing. That's the Spirit's power.
So get in on the action of the Spirit in your life, and invite others to come.
See you at St. Charles Seminary next Saturday at 7 p.m. If you need directions, call me at 668-HOPE.